welcome to the Shade Tree Garage. Today we're working on my 2000 Ford Explorer. Had this about 7 years. A family member gave it to me with a blown engine, and I put a new engine into it. I've been using it as kind of my hunting buggy backup vehicle for quite some time. It's been a very reliable truck till now. It has a P0455 gross leak in the evap system, so we're going to be looking at that today. I've actually been fighting it for a while, and I've made some kind of bodge fixes to limp it along so I didn't have to spend money on it, but I ended up finally caving and buying some parts, so we'll be digging into that. But the main thing right now is that it is consuming a lot of oil. It's not burning oil, I think it's leaking. I put this engine in 40,000 miles and 6-7 years ago, something like that. I just probably didn't. Let me see if I can get a light on it. Probably just didn't do the best sealing it up. I don't know if you can see down there, but it's very, very wet. Looks like a considerable amount of oil has leaked. It's like the valve covers aren't doing great either. It's kind of hard to tell, so I'll record when I get the intake system off so you can see better, but I think that we need to do an upper intake system. So excuse me, it would be an upper seal. So upper intake, lower intake, all that fun stuff. I just got this from Amazon. It was definitely the thriftiest option I had for gaskets because I'm cheap, and this thing isn't, I believe this was 45 bucks, and it's a full intake and head gasket set, but we're not doing head gaskets, so it was cheaper than trying to get it without head gaskets, believe it or not. So I just got those two. This will allow us to go through and hopefully reseal the old Explorer and keep it trucking down the road for a while longer. All right, well, got the upper intake off, working on getting most of the harness unplugged. I've only broken one sensor, some kind of vacuum sensor on the side of the intake, so I'll have to see if Napa has one, run down there and get it. I remembered that I did this a long time ago, and it was one of those get me by things that I spaced, so I will have to cut back the harness here. Of course, it's in the damn shadow. Give myself a little more wire and solder in a more permanent fix. Well, found another thing to replace. I went to relieve the pressure off the fuel rail because, you know, I was about to disconnect the main fuel rail, and I discovered that there was no pressure. There should have been. It should have squirted a little fuel. So I got my leak tester out here, and when I prime the engine, it will go up to 40, but then it immediately starts bleeding down. So I suspect the issue is our fuel pressure regulator right here has finally maybe bit the bullet. So we'll go ahead and replace that while we're in here. All right, well, we got one valve cover off. The engine itself looks pretty good. Since I've put it in, I've changed oil at least every 5,000 miles, sometimes more, depending on how heavy I felt I used it. I think that it looks really good. So we'll go and start moving the harness around over here to get the other valve cover gasket off, and then we'll get this intake off and take a better look there. We'll have to finish the project tomorrow, unfortunately, because our part store doesn't have everything I need with the couple of sensors and the fuel pressure regulator that I need. Lame is what it is. It's a small town. We're lucky to have them. You just got to put up with some stuff sometimes. Alrighty, well, we're at day 2. I managed to get the valve covers off in the upper intake. We did notice that the engine is, and it's not just that those intakes are dark, they're coated in oil. So we have an excessive ingress of oil into the intake. I don't know what could be causing it. I don't think it's blow-by because I'm not seeing a lot of the soot and coke and black build up inside the valve covers that I think you would see with blow-by. In fact, the inside of the engine I think looks extremely clean for 40,000 miles. Feel pretty confident that I've done a pretty good job with oil selection and regular maintenance. I think that the engine itself will give me many years of service. I have my doubts about Ford electronics because it just seems like I've just fought electronics with this truck since I've got it. Luckily, my background is electronics. I'm IT technician, electronics tech first, and a mechanic second. So whereas with a lot of people struggle and probably would have given up, I think I am uniquely suited to keep one of these turds together. But anyway, today we need to get the lower intake off, get everything cleaned up, and then reassemble. I have gotten myself a nice little stack of goodies from Napa this morning. Got a new fuel pressure regulator. We tested the other one yesterday and it's no good anymore. I broke I think this is what activates the EGR, or at least senses that the EGR is working. Maybe that's what it does. Have to look back in the book. But anyways, I snapped one of the ends off, prying the intake off, which was a stupid thing for me to do, but I was in a hurry. That's what happens when you're in a hurry. We got a new one, got a new PCV, just as hopefully a simple fix on the ingress of oil through the upper intake. I hope that that is our problem. I don't know what to do if it's not. I guess just live with the fact that it consumes oil now, because I don't know how much more money I want to put into this thing. And then I got a new 130 amp alternator. I believe I had a 90 on it before, and it did okay, except that I noticed that it was getting a lot of heat scoring on the battery connecting cable, so figured it was time to go ahead and replace it with a bigger one, because I have done an electric fan conversion on this. Tried one first, it wasn't quite enough on these hot Kansas days, so I threw a second in down there. It's just universal kit with I have their universal relay against the firewall here. That's for 2 fans, and then I've wired in, oh, I think it's somewhere, but I wired it in to kick both fans on when the AC compressor comes on, but nothing too major. One thing I do want to add to this truck, and not just to look like a goober, but for it to actually be useful, is a light bar either on the bumper or on the roof, so I needed a bigger alternator for that. I do a lot of duck hunting, and I have some private ponds I have permission to hunt on. The nice thing about this small little truck is, and why I'm putting money into fixing it instead of trying to just get rid of it, is it is perfect for duck hunting. I can lay the seats in the back down, and I can get my raft with all my decoys and everything, my dog in the back of it. I can pull right up on, next to a private pond with it and not worry about getting stuck or having a big heavy truck or something like that. So that's why I'm holding on to this. This Explorer platform is uniquely suited to my needs, so I would like to get lots of service out of it. But anyways, I'd like to put a big light bar on the roof, so that I can turn the nose of the vehicle and point it at the pond when it's 4 in the morning and pitch black, and just light it up, make it easier for decoy placement and stuff like that. So hence the bigger alternator, long story short. Before I can do any of that, I have to make it run. I gotta get in here and get that lower intake fixed, throw it all back together, and hopefully don't miss any connection or bolt, which might be difficult, because it is quite a few bolts. So here we go. Now for the Redneck Minute. This is not the right part, and we had a hell of a time trying to find the right fuel pressure sensor at the parts store. So we went back to an older model, which I assume the engine would be the same, because the 2000, you have a half a shot with the 2000 being a single overhead cam or an overhead valve like mine. So I went back to an older engine, and apparently they changed the design of the pressure sender as it mounts to the fuel rail. However, this outlet, this inlet, and the vacuum pressure are all exactly the same. So it just looks like they changed this housing a little. So I found some longer bolts that were too long and they bottomed out, so I put just a nut in as a washer, and it fits exactly. And it is a 40 PSI regulator, identical to this. The housing is the only thing that's different. So in theory, this should work, and I shouldn't have to go, a week waiting on the correct part, if at all even I'm able to find it. We're gonna keep trucking. That's what we ended up doing. So now on to getting this disconnected and seeing if we're gonna reuse this pigtail or not. I actually have a spare one laying around, because I always kind of figured this was gonna end up biting me in the ass. So start working on that. This is my fault. Figured it would be. As much as it was leaking in after 40,000 miles, I put this engine in. I've done this a while ago. I did it, I want to say 5 years ago. If you look right here, you will see that on the front China wall, there's no pressure right here on this part of the gasket, which means this front never sealed correctly. We will have to clean all this off and start over with a better bead. Hopefully we won't have it unsealed this time. I got the new pigtail patched in. I like to use some of those heat gun shrink with the pre-made solder cores. They seem to work really well. Been using them all the time for everything, so we'll see how they hold up long term. If they don't hold up, that will really suck for me, because that will mean that I have a lot of repairs to do. Bad electrical fix for some crap I had hanging around the shop. That should give me a pretty decent service life. Valve covers are on. I'm starting to reconnect the harness. The valve covers are torqued down to approximately 1/2 ugga-dugga, because I don't really care. It's a cork gasket anyways. I expect it to weep, but I didn't want to spend a lot of money on this. And the 10 silicone coated gaskets for this engine are just completely trash. They're a joke. That's what was on here before, and there's just, let me see if I can find one. They come in the Felpro kit. That's what I used last time, but they just have this thin little strip of sealant along the bottom. Don't hold up. Complete trash. So the only other designed different one I could find was cork. So we put cork on. The lower intake's on as well. The seal kit came with a turkey tray in style intake gasket, which I'm not a fan of, but it looks like it's seated incorrectly and sealed up, so I'm not gonna worry about it. It should be okay. I did RTV the hell out of the block side on every port, which I typically don't do, but by the looks of the tray, I decided that it was necessary. And then on the lower intake side, once I'd set the turkey tray in place, I went back and just used spray tack to get the top side to seal it. And then I used RTV on all sides. And oh, the other thing is I trimmed the pre-pressed silicone off the turkey tray because I don't like those. I trimmed it off and then just used a very, very generous amount of RTV black to seal the China walls. So hopefully this seals a lot better this time. I don't want to come back in here in 40,000 miles, and I guess if I do have to come back in here at 40,000 miles, I'm probably just gonna not and just add oil. So this is probably going to be the last major repair on this engine for me, as I am getting tired. It's just not a fun vehicle to keep up on. I really thoroughly enjoy it when it runs right, but it's 20 something years old, and it really was not designed well or at all some days. I swear some days that it was even worse than designed by committee. I don't even know what you'd call it. Designed by a bunch of monkeys in a room typing on a keyboard, and they ended up making this platform for Ford instead of Shakespeare like they were told to. The company had to make some money somehow, so they sold it to Ford, who will clearly buy any design. And while we're complaining about this vehicle, my number one complaint is packaging. You know, this is a 50, 60 plus year old design engine. It was well over 40 years old when it was put in this vehicle, and they put an aftermarket, or not aftermarket, but they you know, designed a fuel injection system that will work with it and put it on top. Well, the problem with that is that when this engine was designed, it was designed with a different era and ethos for serviceability. I mean, valve cover gaskets, you know, you replace those every 20, 30,000 miles. You know, the engine just didn't have the design tolerances to be packed into this engine bay and covered with electronics, because it is just absurd how much has to come off just to do valve covers. I know that there are other absurd vehicles out there. I'm not saying it's the craziest one, but this is a joke, Ford. Come on. Why would you even try to do this? It's insane to me. And this was a $27,000 vehicle, brand new. This was a pretty top trim, you know, borderline luxury vehicle from Ford. And I think it has a solid, reliable engine in it, but everything else that goes around the engine and the engine management just makes it unserviceable long term. And it's kind of a joke, and it's sad. That's Ford from the mid 90s to the mid 2010s. This was the junk they made. Well, that's gonna do it for tonight. I'll have to come out in the morning and clean things up and top off the radiator. I ran it just for a half second. My fuel pressure thing, as you can guess, my fuel pressure regulator fix did not work. I had to put the old one on. It seems to be working, other than I know its days are numbered. When it sits overnight, it doesn't want to start in the morning because it's lost prime. So I'll have to work a little harder to find that piece, but the new one I put in that I thought I could base out and make work didn't work. So obviously there's something in how that works that I'm missing, just not understanding, because it's 40 psi and the fitting sizes are all the same, so I kind of figured 40 psi is 40 psi, who cares if the housing's different? It's not true. Back together, it runs. There's a couple little things I need to do. I need to get out my plastic welder, fix my throttle. The sheathing broke, so the retention spring's not working correctly. It's causing a high idle situation. Quick fixes. I don't see that taking very long. Looks like it's sealed up and everything. I think if I was going to have a problem fighting seals, I would have by now. As you can see, all the crap from the manifolds is burning off, but nothing from inside the engine, so doesn't appear to be any blow-by to see. But anyway, thank you all for watching. Probably this is going to be a long enough video, so the dealing with the emissions control will be in the next video I do. So keep an eye out on that, and we'll figure out what that gross leak issue is. Thank you for watching. Take care. Like and subscribe. Ah, stupid nonsense.